I love a Goofy movie. In fact, I would say I love a Goofy movie much more than the average person does and should love a Goofy movie. I'm telling you this so that you believe me when I say that I am the foremost knower of knowledge when it comes to the Goofy movie. However, this gift is also a curse. You see, in my studies into the Goofy movie, I have found that this lore creates unanswerable questions that scholars have looked into for decades. I'm here to answer those questions. Join me on my deep dive into a Goofy movie. Spilled some water out of the mug. Now, I would be remiss if I led you to believe that a Goofy movie were the full extent of the Goofy lore. Naturally, that is not the case, but we only have so much time in the day, and I have to keep this video focused on something, so we are only going to talk about a Goofy movie in this video. Only a Goofy movie. Now, in order to answer these unanswerable questions, I do have to explain to you the plot of a Goofy movie. It's a feature-length film, and you're gonna need to know this kind of thing if you want the proper context for these questions. But before I get into it, big spoiler warning! I am going to spoil the entire Goofy movie, and you may be saying, Isaac, this film is over 25 years old, and to that I say, do not spoil this film for yourself! You've been warned! A Goofy movie, despite the title, does not actually follow Goofy, but rather his son, Max. Now, if you aren't well versed in the Goofy lore, it might be easy to assume that Max is a character that was made up originally for a Goofy movie. However, he actually first appeared in the Goofy cartoon, Goof Troop, which was a Disney animated sitcom that aired on the Disney Channel back in the 90s. Now, like I said, I would like to keep this video strictly Goofy movie related, but it is kind of important that you recognize the backstory to these characters. So I'm gonna lead you through a little bit of Goof Troop here, but only because Goof Troop introduced PJ and Max, the two main characters, and it also introduced the dynamic between Goofy and Pete, which is kind of weird because in the show they were neighbors, but in a Goofy movie they're co-workers, which is a whole different level because, in a Goofy movie they live in what seems to be Ohio based on the map that you can see halfway through the film, but in the Goof Troop cartoon they live clearly in Spoonerville, and I don't know what is real anymore. Anyway, we need to focus on a Goofy movie. Where did we leave off? So as I was saying, the protagonist of a Goofy movie is not actually Goofy, but rather his son, Max. And Max's whole thing in the movie is that he wants to go out with Roxanne, this girl from Max's school that he bumps into several times. And the chemistry is natural, but Roxanne begs the first big question of the Goofyverse. Why do the dogs look like that? They are dogs, right? That's not what dogs look like, Disney. Do you know what dogs... That's not what dogs look like, Disney. Now, the appearance of the dogs in the Goofyverse has been a topic of confused discussion since the very early days of Goofy lore. You see, Goofy's been around since the 30s, and everyone's kind of agreed that he's a dog since then. Although there are some outliers that think he's a cow. He's not a cow. What's wrong with you people? Now, I should clarify to those uninformed that there is some disagreement as to when Goofy's first appearance actually was. You see, he first appeared in the 1932 cartoon Mickey's Review, but he went under the name Dippy Dog. You see, just like Mickey in the cartoon Steamboat Willie, he initially went by the name Dippy Dog rather than Goofy, just as Mickey went by Willie. So I think it's safe to assume that even though these are two different names for the same character, that Goofy just went through a phase where he liked to be called Dippy Dog. We all do that in middle school. But back to the question at hand. What is Goofy? Now, if he is a dog, that does have some troubling implications for Pluto, Mickey's four-legged canine friend. He is also a dog, but he is a pet dog, which is disturbing a lot. But it's even more disturbing when you consider that Pluto does not appear to have sentience. He seems to just be a dog, like any other dog. At first glance, this is very problematic. If Pluto's a dog and Goofy's a dog, this is bad. However, the voice of Goofy, Bill Farmer, aka Goofy himself, has stated in an interview as of May 2020 that, quote, he speculates that it could be called Canis Goofus. How original. So basically, Goofy is a different member of the canine family altogether, not even a dog. And like I said, This is Bill Farmer we're talking about. This is the closest I can get to going to Goofy and asking, "What are you?" Goofy being classified as Canis Goofus does imply in my mind that every canine character in the Mickey Mouse / Goofy universe who is sentient is in fact Canis Goofus. Pluto, I guess, is just a dog, and dogs aren't allowed to be sentient. Now back to Roxanne. I mentioned earlier she's a very complicated character because she shows up in a Goofy movie and never again. Not even the direct sequel, an extremely Goofy movie. Side note, don't watch an extremely Goofy movie. Roxanne never appeared in Goof Troop, and it's especially odd that she didn't appear in either of these properties because she's kind of one of the main characters of the movie. The whole movie is Max trying to get Roxanne to go out with him, to see him at the big Powerline concert, take him to prom or whatever it is in that movie. Roxanne is the main object of Max's affection in this film. And while I suppose it's realistic that he doesn't keep up with some random high school crush he had, come on, Disney, let me have this one. Until recently, that is, in the Ducktales Reboot that I still have not seen, but I do research for these videos, so I would know. There is an episode of this new Ducktales Reboot wherein Goofy visits Donald, Scrooge, and the Triplets, and in this reboot, he opens up his wallet to show a series of pictures of him and Max, and in one of the pictures, Max and Roxanne. Which means, in at least one corner of the Mickey Goofyverse, Roxanne and Max are still together after the events of a Goofy movie, unless this timeline is bonkers. You see, can the old DuckTales and the new DuckTales exist in the same universe? Maybe not, but maybe so. And if so, where does that take place canonically in the timeline, before or after a Goofy movie? And is that between an extremely Goofy movie? Okay, let's get back to a Goofy movie. After an extremely vivid dream sequence, Max gets up and realizes he's late for school. He gets an exasperated phone call from PJ. PJ standing for Pete Jr., that's Pete's son, Pete from the classic Mickey Mouse cartoons, who's been a classic foil for Goofy. With the implication of Max going to high school, we get another big question, and this is very complicated. I'm not going to get into it much. We're trying to keep on focus here for a Goofy movie. But in the Goof Troop cartoon, the students canonically live in Spoonerville. Spoonerville is probably not in Ohio? Probably. But in a Goofy movie, there's a scene where Max pulls out the family map where they're going on their road trip, and at the beginning of the road trip, it's listed around the Columbus, Ohio region. That's confusing for a couple of reasons, but we can just assume that Spoonerville is in Ohio, which I love. Now, in a Goofy movie, the students and Max's friends all canonically go to Spoonerville High School, and you're never gonna believe this. I Googled Spoonerville High School and I dug deep into the research, and they made it up for a Goofy movie. There's nothing, it's not a real high school. But I did some more research. Spoonerville High School may not be a real high school. However, Spoonerville, the town that's presumably in Ohio, still does not exist. You thought I would start a scandal regarding a Goofy movie. I would never start a scandal regarding a Goofy movie. Max realizes he's late for school and rushes out the door after a brief altercation with his father, Goofy. And at this point, we get the opening song for the movie, called After Today. She'll be mine. Now with After Today, we start to get a hold of one of the big, more poignant themes in a Goofy movie. The songs go way harder than they need to. Like, these are too good. Please stop spoiling me, Goofy. And just some production history, so you know the meaning behind the sentence, the songs in a Goofy movie are better than they have any right to be. Because hear me out. A Goofy movie was their C project. You see, at the same time they were making a Goofy movie, they were making a little movie you might have heard of called, I don't know, The Lion King. And if you'll believe me when I say this, The Lion King was their B project. Disney didn't even have their best guys working on that. Imagine who they had making a Goofy movie. In fact, budget was so low and priority was also so low that the people they got to make this movie weren't even the feature film animation studio, but the television studio to make this movie. And the songs are still this good. I am not hyperbolizing when I say this is a masterpiece. There's no way this movie should have worked. And here I am. But this isn't an essay on the history of a Goofy movie. I'm just trying to take you through the plot of a Goofy movie. We are like 5 minutes in, people. After Today, we are introduced to two of the most pivotal side characters in this entire movie. Pete Jr. and Bobby Zimmerowski. He's my favorite. PJ technically first appeared in the 1942 short Bellboy Donald, in this short, he mostly just acted like a younger, smaller, more marketable version of Pete. I wouldn't really count this one because this appearance is arguably a different character with how different he acts. You see, in the original, he's a hyperactive child, but in a Goofy movie, he's more of an anxious mess who just does whatever his dad tells him to do. Though Pete Jr. first appeared in 1942, he didn't reappear until the 90s. You guessed it, we're heading back to Goof Troop! It's worth noting that in Goof Troop, PJ has multiple other siblings, but in a Goofy movie, he seems to be more of an only child. There are a lot of weird canonical inconsistencies like this, but I am willing to suspend my disbelief for a Goofy movie. There aren't enough inconsistencies to warrant me saying that these two properties are in a separate universe. They aren't. They're in the same universe. And also, I can just concede that the other children are at their mom's house. And then there's Bobby Zimmerowski. Bobby Zimmerowski is one of the best characters to grace the screen of cinema ever. This is why.
Slurpage. Don't give me that attitude, you guys. I'm doing it all for you.
Huh? Max, look. It's the Leaning Tower of Cheesa.
Bobby was played brilliantly in both Goofy movies by Pauly Shore. Fun fact, Shore had enough star power by the time the first Goofy movie went around, he decided to actually go uncredited in the movie so that they didn't rely entirely on his star power to market the film. Because man, they needed it. Anyway, by the time we got to the sequel, An Extremely Goofy Movie, he didn't care and got ninth billing. But we're not talking about an extremely Goofy movie. We're talking about a Goofy movie. Now in the next scene, Max gets to school. Bobby and PJ help him set up this elaborate plan to win over Roxanne. He wants to take her to Stacy's party. That's what they're doing in this movie. The plan goes as follows. Max interrupts an assembly held by Principal Mazer. Science slumber parties! And then he gets thrown into a bottomless pit. Once he interrupts the assembly, he and his two friends, Bobby and PJ, help him recreate the music video to Powerline's Stand Out. Sidebar, Stand Out is the second best song in the movie, we'll get to that later. He lip syncs to the song, gets really close to Roxanne, and we never see the rest because Mazer crawled out of that bottomless pit, I guess, and he put Max in detention for the... I don't know, presumably it was going to be forever, but hijinks ensued, obviously. And side note, it's kind of weird that just one pair of sunglasses was enough disguise for Max. You see, it's well established in the beginning of the film that Max is at least well known enough to be a laughingstock, but evidently he's still unpopular enough to be able to hide beneath just a pair of sunglasses, which is a big mood. Anyway, after Stand Out, Max gets sent to the principal's office where he meets up with Roxanne, and he's able to invite her to Stacy's party, and things are going really well. I guess she's into Powerline. I jest. Everyone's into Powerline. Anyway, he succeeds at asking her out to Stacy's party where they will be watching the new Powerline concert live on pay-per-view. And at this point, you've heard me mention Powerline more than a few times, and if you're unfamiliar with the movie, you may be confused. Who or what is this Powerline? I will explain. In the words of Max, he's only the biggest rock star on the planet, Dad. Although, factually, he's not bigger than Xavier Cugat, the Mambo King. Everybody Mambo! The majority of the movie centers around Powerline, as it's about Max's quest to get to the Powerline concert in LA in an attempt to impress Roxanne. And because of this, Powerline's role in the story is arguably equally as important as Roxanne. Which is funny, because just like Roxanne, Powerline is another character that was created exclusively for this movie, was not in Goof Troop, and later reappeared in the Ducktales Reboot, which is different in this case. It wasn't a physical appearance, and rather one of the triplets singing Stand Out with Della Duck in an airplane. I want to say Huey, but I cannot remember. If there's one thing that we've learned today, it's that the Ducktales Reboot is the only thing holding this universe together, and I really need to watch it. So Max celebrates successfully asking out Roxanne by dancing with the receptionist. Which is a little weird, but I'll let it slide. You know who won't let it slide? Principal Mazer. Mazer, in his endless anger, calls Max into his office where he endlessly berates him, and then sends a phone call to Goofy at his job, no less, wherein he threatens Max with an electric chair. What? Also, just before this, we get our first look at Goofy's day job, which is either extremely cute or extremely creepy, depending on how you look at it. Basically, he's a photographer where he and Pete take photos of babies to give to their parents. Which, like I said, is either way too cute or very, like, red flag. Also, it is implied, if not outright stated, that Pete has held his position at the weirdly specific infant photography place longer than Goofy, which really raises a whole lot of questions about Goofy's career history and what he's been doing as a job to make ends meet. And what is also really strange is how many jobs Goofy has had over the years, although that's less strange when you remember that characters in the Goofyverse don't age. Goofyverse characters not aging is also something that applies to the much larger Mickey Mouse animated universe, or MMAU as I will be calling it, because these characters not only don't age, but they also hold themselves to a lot of other animated rules that have been consistent since the 30s. What are these rules, I hear you asking? I will explain, because I can't not explain. And it's kind of hard to explain, actually, so I'm gonna do it through metaphor. And the metaphor I will choose is the metaphor of Goofy's hat. You see, in the first appearance of Goofy, his hat was black and white, much like everything else around him. Everything in these shorts is black and white, and that's exactly what they are. Shorts, which means they are short, which means the brim of Goofy's hat is short. And Goofy's hat reflects the change into the modern era when the cartoons start to get longer. His hat turns green, which not only symbolizes that there is now color in these cartoons, it also symbolizes the longer length of the cartoons, because as we all know, green means go, as in, go ahead and make longer cartoons. And this is why it is extra strange that he does not have a hat in a Goofy movie, when thematically, he would need it most. This is something that has been troubling me for the entire decade and a half that I have inhabited this earth. Goofy does not have a hat, and I don't know why. We need to know the secret behind Goofy's hat. I'm sorry. It seems I may have gotten a little too excited. A Goofy movie is a topic that I am very passionate about. There's very few things in this world that bring me more joy than allowing people to watch this certified masterpiece of a film. And so, I must end my analysis. I know we began this video with a spoiler warning, but be honest. If you clicked this video, you were going to watch it to the end regardless if you had seen this 25-year-old movie. It was hard to do, but I had to make the decision to cut out all the spoiler-filled parts so that you could have the experience of watching a Goofy movie. So go, watch it on Disney+. Watch it on Amazon Video. It is weirdly cheap for how good it is. I realize now that diving this deeply into a Goofy movie may have been a mistake. It's just a cartoon. An extremely goofy cartoon. Which leads me into my next point, an extremely goofy movie, because that movie is not only a lesser experience of a film, but it poops all over the legacy of the first one. It destroys the canon, the lore, the established character. I mean, it's not bad, but I just really hate it. Kind of like Donkey Kong, the character Donkey, not the games, not the Donkey Kong games. The Donkey Kong games are great, the character Donkey, I hate him. Don't watch it an extremely goofy movie. Watch a Goofy movie, please. Do it for my sanity. Please.